turning on you, you look too good to me. You be the only thing to get me into, but I just can't let you be. It's a free for all, and I heard it said you can bet your life. The stakes are high, and so am I. And it's the yeah tonight. See you there, but you should shine green, and I got my eyes on you. I should get up and look at my face, and don't tell them what I do. I can hear you, sweet young thing, the magic's in my hands. It's a free for all.
It's a free for all, everyone. Joe Lewis here, Battle Rankings Live. We got a show. I know the weather is icky outside. Miles will stay in and watch Battle Rankings Live. We have a heck of a show for you guys tonight. And we're full of energy. I'm full of piss and vinegar myself. So, yeah. First of all, I'm operating on 2 hours of sleep. Yeah, we had a problem at work, and I didn't fix it until 5 o'clock in the morning. So, yeah. But anyway, yeah, good times. I didn't spend most of the morning explaining what the hell happened. So nothing doing like that. I am joined by my lovely and talented producer, Ann. Say hi, Ann.
Hi, Ann.
And hey, what song we got there?
Oh, well, it's Free for All, originally recorded by Terrible Ted Nugent, the Detroit City Madman. This version is done by a gentleman by the name of Mike Como, who is doing all of the work himself, and I'll post the link to him in the comments.
There you go. Yeah. So free for all. We're covering free for all. But hey, let's do some housekeeping.
And of course, we picked that because Joe likes to always, when you guys play free for all, you have to quote the lyrics of that song.
I know. I every time. Well, before in version 3, when they announced it was, they picked out free for all, and I would say, when in doubt, I whip it out. And I'm in a rock and roll band. It's a free for all anyway. So That's just me. So by the way, if you guys like what we're doing here, remember you can catch every episode on our YouTube channel where we have it all broken out. This will be under the mission section. We cover rules, cover books, anything about Flames of War and Team Yankee. It's all there for your perusing. And we're slowly coming towards 100 episodes. Which is pretty good, I think, for what we do. So, and by the way, if you like it, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you're in Facebook, hit all that information, and follow us so that you know when we go live, so you can join us. And then, of course, the archives are there for you to enjoy at your leisure. Let's go through the some housekeeping. I don't think I've added any. Oh, actually, I got to take the Vegas off of there, but I didn't add any new ones since last time. But there's a lot of stuff coming out there, and it's hopping up. Got a lot of stuff happening in February now that we're in February, some March. So we're there's basically. I just need to. Oh, now that the Las Vegas is open. Hope the guys in California will start running some games, and we'll get those out there.
Fayetteville, is it Arizona or Arkansas? What is the AR?
AR? It's Arkansas.
I thought, no. Okay, I guess Alaska's AK, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering what it's AR. Okay.
Yeah. Arizona's, I believe, AZ.
AZ, that's right.
Right. So, Arkansas. Matter of fact, I think Charlie Clay has something to do with that one there. But you've got the 19th. There's 4 tournaments going on: Ohio, Delaware, Minneapolis. That's right. Yeah, remember we were supposed to collect that. The February. Thanks, John.
Yeah, the Crossroads one. Yeah, you linked to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually sent it to himself in Messenger. And
yeah, I know. It's not at Table Games. It's actually at the Crossroads. So that's where that's at. Not in Newark, Ohio. I'll get that fixed. You know what? Actually, speaking of which, one of the things we're going to be doing is I put out a help wanted ad to do what we do here. Not that we make any money, but we do it for the love of the hobby.
In fact, you spend more money than you.
Oh yeah, it's a money pit.
It's throwing money into
it is a money pit. Basically it's And so I put a help wanted, and I got some excellent people that answered so far. And the thing is, originally we put it out, we were looking for one, and then we were talking. We're like, oh wait a minute, we could many hands make light work. So what we're doing is asking people, what do you want to do, and how it could fit into what we're doing, and we're dividing up the work. So, which is really awesome. So I'm really looking forward to that. We actually, out of that, we actually got a marketing director. I want to see what happens with that. I mean, they can't do worse than I did, or I am, or whatever. Anyway, by the way, one of the things we are looking for, and if you're watching this, one is, it's just the way it goes. We get a lot of people. We don't have a lot of people who watch live. Even when we do, the idea to do it live was to get people to ask questions when we have our SMEs, and we don't get too many live questions. It's great when we do. That's why we do it live. But I know more than 90% of the people that view watch it later. So I know that people are going to ask questions. So what we're looking for, and if you are interested and you want to be on camera, I'm looking for what we call the third chair. And the third chair, I want it to be someone who is newish to the game. And
I don't really count as second chair, so they can be second chair.
Okay, whatever. It's a third chair.
All right.
And the idea is to have a newish person who's learning the game that will ask the question. Because if you come up with the question, there's probably 50 or 60 people who will watch it later that have that same question. And then I think it'll just make a better, well-rounded show. Because when I'm talking to an SME and they say something, I'll probably just go, oh, of course it's that way. I know that. But someone who's newer might go, well, what do you mean by that? And so that's what we're looking for, to actually make a better show. So anyway, that's what we're going to be doing there. So let's what we're going to do.
Someone asked Austin asked a question.
Yeah, I know.
Taking the game, Brian said the one that destroys yours.
yeah. So Austin says live question: what's your favorite tank in the game? And Brian answered, the one that destroys yours in a game. So that's kind of funny. Let's introduce our guests. We have plenty of them, and our SME for the day. So it all kind of clumbered in. We'll start with Brian Coaches, and then Tim McClellan. Hey Tim, who's on mute, and Jake Meyer, and who all were at LVO. That's why we asked them to come on here, and our SME for today to do free for all and encounter, Andrew Hobson. Hello, Andrew.
Hello, Joe.
Oh, by the way, while we're in the beginning here, for the first show in May, I am planning to do a Jeopardy-like quiz show.
Oh, no.
Yes. Okay. And it's everything Russians. Okay.
Where's Joe Kobe? Where is Joe Kobe?
Yeah. And so what we're going to do is so if you're
Bit of a
interested in
Mayday show.
yeah, it's going to be a Mayday show, and what we're going to do is do everything Russians. You're going to have categories like entertainment, literature.
Brian's got the right hat, I think, for that, don't you, Brian?
Oh, absolutely, I do.
Yeah, so if you're interested in that, email us, and then we'll find out of the people who sent us that want to be part of it, we'll find 3 people who are pretty strong, and Ann and I are making up the questions. So that's different and fun, and it's and everything Russians. So okay, anyway, let's move forward. So.
I can't put like a Brady Bunch here.
500, Alex.
Yeah, yeah. It's the color of it's known for the color of the square. Anyway, what is red? That's right. Anyway, so let's talk about LBL first. One of the things. Let's see which way works better. Go this way, or this way. No, that ain't working either. This way. Yeah, that way works better. Hey, so what, Friday, you guys were doing Team Yankee, and so Keith Gilmore came out. I guess I'll just start from the top. Brian, what did you wear on the runway, or no? What did you bring?
I brought U.S. Marines. So I had a bunch of LAVs and like a small group of U.S. infantry and armored cav. So with some patents.
Well, how did 90 points work out for the Marines?
70.
Yeah,
70, right? 70. Sorry.
90 points would have been cheating. So 70 worked out. It worked out fine. I thought it was a great point level. I got to take everything I wanted to take, and I thought it was fun. I think I finished every game.
90.
Find out. Yeah, I lost the second one, but yeah, it was a fun time. It was a good point amount.
Tim, what did you bring for the event?
U.S. Marines also. It's the only thing I own, so it's the only thing I ever take.
Right. And how did and I guess the 70 points worked out for them well too.
Yeah, it's I run infantry. It's an infantry heavy force, so I can always bring a lot of infantry even at low points. Just didn't have a lot of tanks with me, but they still defend just as well at 70 as they do at the higher points.
And then Jacob, what did you bring?
I brought West German Panzer Is with an allied formation of Iraqi infantry. So it kept it down to a point where I could actually fit it in my deployment area. So that's always nice with Team Yankee. I did run up against another similar list with a NATO formation and allied Iraqi infantry, and we drew, but that's Team Yankee.
Yeah. Let's see. Keith Gilmore took the event. It looks like he tied, but won on the tiebreakers.
From the schedule.
Yeah, on strength of schedule. But won on.
Whoops, sorry, guys. Continue.
What was that?
Nothing. I had a bit of a problem here. That's okay.
Okay.
Sorry, guys. Continue.
And John Muir, so strength of schedule. I believe they played each other at the end and did a 3-3, so that's interesting. Actually, Thomas Wheeler actually had a chance if he would have gone 8 at the end. He could have took it. So that's pretty good. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 players with 3 wins. Huh. Not bad.
Big enough tournament that 3 rounds didn't have enough separation, but one day a Team Yankee's great.
Oh yeah, and the 70 points. I know Adepticon 74, so similar. 4 rounds, but see how that goes. All right. Let's talk about Flames of War Nationals. The gentlemen were kind enough to share their lists, and we'll go that way because basically Jacob took first, Tim took second, and Brian took third, followed by a pair of bests. First of all, how are the tables?
The tables that were played for Team Yankee were fine, and then they just started getting shorter on terrain. The tables after that were after about table 12 were pretty sparse in a lot of ways. Like to see that potentially fleshed out a little bit more in the future tournaments that they have there.
Yeah, 40 or 20 some tables is a lot for one club.
Yeah.
I mean, they did a great job with what they had.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
it kind of reminds me of the first year we did ETC when it was in Serbia. The local club there, of course, that's, I don't know how many tables, it's 50, 60 something tables, but they had the local schools make like little terrain pieces as like extra credit and stuff like that. But some idea like that to help flesh that out and support the doing stuff in the schools and things like that would maybe something to look into.
Well, Cliff asked, what does sparse mean with regards to layout? Was it, I guess what they're trying to, I don't know, I'm going to read a little bit more into the question. Is it sparse because you like a little bit more terrain, or was it sparse just because they were really having trouble covering tables?
Yeah, they really haven't. So the best example I have is my first and last game in the Flames of War. My first game, my opponent we played free for all, unfortunately for him. He had one about 8-inch tree section on his side of the table. I had 2, and then there was like what we played as tall hedges a little bit. There was like maybe 6 of those, and there was like one little tree thing and like one building. So he really, it was kind of a mirror list for me against mine. And he just had he had like his whole army in the one tree, and it was pretty bad. And then in my last game, I played JB against his Soviet tank force, and I mean, there was just like, it just turned out to be free for all again. And I had one building on my side plus another building on the other side to kind of put my stuff behind to cover those objectives. And he basically had nothing.
Yeah.
So
several of the tables would force the attacker to attack across open, unconcealed terrain for multiple turns to come to grips with the enemy. And it didn't really, some of them would not reward maneuvering, but rather the range and size of your gun.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. All right. Good to know. I think that's so, especially for a national event. It's probably should poke Battlefront about pushing some terrain out there for someone, especially for a group that's running a nationals forum.
And they're doing it year after year, and so you would hope Battlefront would want to. If they're not going to send their tables out, which I don't know what the status of their tables are, then being able to support that local group would be fantastic.
Yeah, that would be great. All right, so let's. Okay, Brian, I guess we'll begin with you first because there's your list. You third with the jumbo is what you called it. Version 2. You must have had a version 1.
I did have a version 1, and this is probably the 8th list I got to that I was comfortable with. But yeah, so my original plan was to go with Chaffee's, and I wasn't going to have them all painted in time. So went with this. I had a little bit more painted. I did have 2 full platoons of Chaffee's. The Lake Tank Company, the veteran Lake Tank Company, was 3rd Spearhead. So you're taking a morale hit and a remount hit. But I was using Patton to compensate for that. My list is pretty static. It's everything on the board other than the tank platoon that has the jumbo and the easy 8s in, and the spearhead Chaffee. So that gives me exactly 44 points. That's what I mean by static. I did have a lot of thinking to do. That's what was off the board anytime I had the reserves. I wanted, when I sent this in, they said, well, if you move the Jumbo 76 down into the Sherman platoon and replace that 75 or swap the 2, then you're not losing a point with the hypervelocity AP card. And that didn't really work for me because I did want some AT on the board at the beginning, which is the Jumbo 76 with its 2 AT-12 shots, and the Jumbo in the tank platoon was just there to kind of soak up shots and direct fire smoke with it, which it managed to do not a single time in the entire tournament, even though I fired it that way. And then I have the recon troop with the bunch of additional Jeep mortars in it, and then the Chaffee with that aren't affected by the 3rd Spearhead. Had air superiority, which turned out to be used once and came in against John Mayer, and I think it affected him 1 round. So kind of a wasted 3 points there, but who knows? Maybe that was the 1 round that I needed not to have it. Then I did downgrade one of my Sherman tank in the HQ to kind of save myself a point.
Oh, okay.
But overall, I'm pretty satisfied with this list. Well, it performed the way I thought it was going to perform. I did have a little issue with artillery, priest specifically. I couldn't kill a darn thing. My little 60-meter Jeep mortars had more kills individually than my priest did. So kind of disappointing there. But that comes down to not necessarily the function of the unit, but just my guys hating me like they normally do.
Okay, couple questions. One, did the hypervelocity make a difference?
It did. It did make a difference, especially when you're shooting that stuff at range. So I never ran into like any front armor 9 or 10. So I take that back. I did run in John's game, ran into Panzer 470s, but shooting them from the front wasn't what I was doing at that time. I was shooting them in the side with the Chaffies. That's how I ended up getting rid of them. But yeah, but shooting something like T-34s or shooting that, I had a bunch of mirror games. Well, I had 2 games that were kind of mirror against my list. So shooting at easy 8s, that's kind of where I was able to shoot at range and still have a pretty good chance of still not being able to make a roll.
Okay. It's the patent card. How'd that work out?
It worked out great. Mostly had to, most of the time the stuff when they got shot just died. But in Chris's game, where we did the 1-1 draw, where it was just bloodshed across the board, but we couldn't get enough. He basically had to kill the platoon down to the team because the HQ was helping those teams re-roll. So I think I ended up killing his Hellcat, and he killed one of my He may have killed one of my Chaffee. I think he got one of my Chaffies, which is no points. It's still 1-1. But
Now,
but yeah, but he helped out. He was a great 4 points. The biggest thing probably though was the reroll on reserves.
all right. Well, did he? Because you have 2 HQs, does that mean they both get the effect of the patent card?
That is correct. It is a force card, not a formation card. So it's any HQ in that list, which is another reason why I went with the 2 formations.
Right. And going the veteran versus the I guess regular, was it worth the points to go for the vet?
I think it was. Well, Jake, did you play a veteran force? Playing against Fretz with his train force, his D-Day, you have a lot more stuff with trains. So I think because my plan was to attack the entire time, and looking back, not knowing what we were getting into with terrain, it helped out quite a bit having, to be base hit on 4s as opposed to be base hit on 3s. If it was terrains a little bit more regularly, or there was more intervening terrain, I think terrain would probably be fine. But in this case, there wasn't a lot of terrain, and it helped out.
Okay. Well, that's good. Anyway, I know you. I was watching every round. Check in every round, and I saw that you were just climbing. You had a slow start, and then was climbing right on up.
Well, and that was due to I stopped using my dice and started using my opponent's dice about right after Fretz's game. So there's like a turn in my third game against Blake where he had killed both of my jumbos with Persians at long range. I didn't want the whole thing. And I think I had like 7 of the 10 Chaffies left. That was really kind of the only thing in my list, and I needed to dig out battle weary armored rifle plus the Persians and everything. So I just put my dice aside and said, hey, we're going to use yours. And after that, it worked out. I was able to kill the Persians, dig out the infantry, and win with, I think I had like 4 Chaffies left at that point. But yeah, and then in the other games, I gave my dice 1 round, and when your opponent goes, I'd rather have you use your dice instead of mine because I'm rolling so many 1s. It's kind of indication how the dice went. But yeah.
Is there anything that you changed with your list after the fact?
Well, yeah, I could save points with like taking air superiority out because I only had 1 plane there, and that's a wasted 3 points. The easy 8s were nice because of the 2s on cross, and because the lack of terrain. You spent a lot of time in what little terrain that you have. So I don't know if I would necessarily use that or go down and save 3 points on that. But other than that, I kind of like the way this list operated. I don't think I've changed too terribly much with it.
The extra Greyhound in the recon patrols?
Oh, absolutely the most valuable piece there because you can lose a Greyhound or be a little bit more aggressive with those Greyhounds and then not have to worry about making morale rolls when you have 2 Jeeps left.
Right. Yeah. Well, that to be a real shame way of losing the Chaffies in that list.
You could get 2 more recon patrol formation platoons in the.
Indeed, and when they roll up the machine guns, they kill all your Jeeps, and then you're having to roll morale every turn instead of having 2 M8s. That's the just my preference to have 4. I do the same thing in mid-war. It's just to me safer. And can be more, I tend to be aggressive at times with my recon, probably when I shouldn't be, and it allows me to make mistakes and not immediately pay for it.
Okay. All right. With that, let's move on to second place, Tim McClellan. Tim, wow, look at that. More Shermans. What was your philosophy here?
Well, big shout out to a player in our group, Howard West. He actually came up with the bones of this list, and I just kind of tweaked it to something that I wanted it to be. But he's the one that kind of developed this stripped down Sherman list, Sherman spam list. So big thanks to him. You take the vet Sherman list with third armored, and you strip out all the late Shermans to the early Shermans. You end up saving 27 points. So those vet tanks with pretty decent armor and a good gun end up being about 4 points apiece. So they're actually cheaper than if you just went with the trained version. So you're getting vet guys for 4 points. I think that it handles really well. You need decent AT to be able to handle that. So AT9 really can't handle this list too well. You really need something bigger, and I don't think a lot of lists have many guns that are bigger than AT9.
All right. So when you said strip down, you took the card that makes them, instead of a 7 front, it's a 6 front.
Yeah, that's right.
And
makes the 6 front and takes away the protected ammo also.
Oh, it takes the protected ammo. Okay. And then then you took the third armor, which affects their morale.
That's right.
But then you took Patton.
Right.
Which,
so, taking third armored, I think that especially with this number of tanks, you have to take Patton with that 5+ remount. You just aren't going to be getting in very often. Even if you do have just a regular reroll, you're only going to be getting in about half the time. With Patton, you're pretty much guaranteed to get in. So if you're really pushing an objective, you got to play, push your guys out in the open. You're taking hits. You want to make sure that they're getting back in. If you just take third armored without Patton and you get out of your tank, it's pretty much a dead tank anyway. Because it's just standing there bailed out for most of the game.
Then you got the tank destroyers, 2 sets. And that's the one you bought the hypervelocity for?
Yeah, I bought hypervelocity for both of them to make them both AT-13. I was expecting to see a lot of Tigers, Crocodiles, 470s, and actually only thinking two of my games I only saw AT-9. So I don't want to say it really went to waste, but I don't exactly think that AT-13 was needed to go against a bunch of light armor on most of the games anyway.
Okay. No, that's good.
I do have a question for Tim. I noticed one of your platoons has 4 in it. Obviously, you're trying to adjust 4 points and everything. How did you find the performance of receiving hits different between the 5-tank platoon and the 4-tank platoon? It was the 5 is obviously you have an extra tank, it's a little bit more survivable, but do you find that having that extra tank is really worth that additional points into it?
Yeah, I really liked having the 5-tank platoon. The 4-tank platoon was kind of my, hey, go clean up that infantry over there, or go clean up these recon vehicles. So it wasn't my hammer, so to speak, and I wasn't depending on it to, really push the attack. The 5-tank platoon, you're rolling up, you're getting 10 shots with stabilizers. So I would much rather prefer the 5-tank platoon rather than taking out 1 tank from each of those and just running around with 3 4-tank platoons.
It also makes reserves a lot simpler.
It does.
Oh.
And did you have set reserves for your list? Kind of like what I did mine. I knew I was going to put the Chaffies and the Easy 8 in reserve. Did you have this has to be in reserve when?
Yeah, I did. There were 2 setups I could have went with. The one I went with most was a 5 platoon, a 4 platoon, and then the Hellcats in reserve. But if if it was going to be like a reconnaissance company that I was facing or something with not a lot of high AT that I just cleaned up with my Sherman shots, both of my tank destroyers and my priests would have been in reserve.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. The lack of infantry, did that hurt or it didn't matter?
I don't think it really mattered. I think, kind of everybody's starting to figure out that Flames is a tanks game now. Infantry it's kind of losing its luster. Even if you do have a defensive tank list or a defensive infantry list, with the smoke that's available, you can smoke, get around the pack front, get around the 17 pounders, and then you can just start putting a template down and just blasting with main guns. And like I said, with this armor, having tanks on the board, you can't just sit there and shoot rifles at it like you would with other infantry platoons. So even having like one tank or one infantry platoon to defend in a mission like free for all or encounter, all their artillery assets, if you only have one squishy platoon, all their artillery assets are going to go on that and it's going to evaporate. So I think, having the token infantry platoon, so to speak, is a waste of points.
Okay. Fair. Now to go over the course of the weekend, is there anything that you would change in your list?
Yeah, after I, one of those things where it's like, after you click send, 15 minutes later, you're like, I should have done that. What I was thinking about is dropping the veteran M10s, dropping the Greyhound platoon, and dropping the Lucky card. And that would be able to free up enough points for a dedicated Hellcat company, 2 platoons of Hellcats with a security section. So I'd still have my recon.
Yeah.
And as Brian pointed out, I'd have another formation leader. So I could have the formation around the Hellcats. So Patton could affect their remount as well with the 2+. And I still have 2 tank destroyers on the board as well. So I think at 110 points, that's the way I'll go next time. Once we start shaving points, it's now I got to make some decisions on what else to take out.
I did look at the armies that played. I said a lot of Americans. And was there like just one Russian or something like that, or 2 Russians?
There were more, but there were more British and Americans than Russians.
Interesting.
British, Americans, Germans made up the vast majority. Russians were less.
Yeah, John was there. Too many Americans. Yes.
No, they're the new thing, so it was expected.
Those pesky tourists. All right. Awesome. Let's move on to, I think, probably. Okay. So Jake.
Before we go on, I want to give a shout out. I'm going to embarrass Tim for a moment. Shout out to Tim. He was really sick going into the second day and didn't know if he was going to make it. And he came in literally a couple minutes before the round to start. Power through the day, even though he was not feeling very well. So kudos to you, Tim, for being down there and finishing out the rest of the tournament.
Well, thank you, sir. If we're doing shout outs, then I got to thank Jake twice here, because actually first round I was supposed to have a bye, and I'll be honest, I really didn't want to bye, flying all the way to Vegas. I wanted to play some games, and Jake was kind enough to take the bye the first round for me. And honestly, I don't even know if I've talked to Jake before that. So that was our first encounter. He was a great guy about it, and he set me on my way. And we played that first game on round 2, and I had to take many breaks during our game. So I appreciate his understanding and patience.
See, Jake is a gaming addict, so it doesn't take much to twist his arm in Vegas.
Yeah, I was in Vegas. I'll take the bye.
I was like, "Hey Jake, you want to take the bite?" And he's like, "There's an outline of him," and he's like at the craps table already.
Tim, do you know what you ate that made you sick?
Well, my wife and I went to an oyster bar, and the only thing different was she had clams, I had oysters, and she had like some kind of pasta, and I had gumbo. Sorry.
Okay.
Jumbo on the brain. So it was either I want to say it was the oyster, because the gumbo was like boiling hot. I don't think anything could have survived in there.
So you had oysters in a city in the desert.
That is correct. Yeah.
All right.
Gas station sushi. So.
Yeah. The best.
Like that whole Futurama episode where he eats the little gas station sandwich and gets like brain worms that makes him smarter.
Yep.
Don't make me smarter.
Well, let's look. Okay, first place. So I was saying Jake was on last week. He was the SME for Outflanked. By the way, did you play Outflanked?
I did not.
Okay.
I didn't have a whole lot of mission variety during 3 days there.
I asked about his list. He talked about it, so we briefly talked about it, and so here's the list. I would say unorthodox
In all of its glory.
in all its glory.
Yeah, well,
it worked.
Yeah, it boils down to a T-26 tank and an infantry stand for the Finns are exactly the same. And when you compare the two, it's like the T-26s are little space marines. They're armored. They cannot be pinned. They're immune to small arms fire. They're immune to mortars, which is the most prevalent artillery piece. And they can assault. They can move faster. They have so many advantages over just regular infantry. So I kind of took those in place of infantry and just swarmed around the board with them. And it turned out to be pretty successful, as I got some pretty good tables and missions and pairings and whatnot. So everything just kind of worked out for me.
Is it 47 T-26s?
49.
49.
Yeah.
When me and Jake played, he said that he had 24 tanks in reserve, and that's how many I had in my list. I mean,
so
guess who painted
Look at
them?
Andrew's face. Like, what is
kudos to Brian for painting all of them.
Yeah, it's a lot of little tanks. So okay, and then I guess your hammers the where are they at?
The T-26s themselves were responsible for the vast majority of my kills. The T-34-85s they hit harder, but they're also the number one prime target. So they were kind of a fleet and bean that their presence made my opponents to be that required them to be a bit more cautious in their movement. They were a pretty good ambush unit. They were very often my reserve units because they come on. Essentially, they take the place of 4 T-26 platoons. So they came on quickly. They ambushed and killed some things, but for the most part, it was the T-26s just swarming around things. Really, I thought Tim's list was like the best possible matchup against me with the Shermans. All you need is 6 front armor, and that's great. But even those tanks, the T-26s, got around behind. I think the T-34-85s were kind of the all-star of that game, as for whatever reason they couldn't seem to miss a couple rounds.
Let me set it up. So for those who were not aware, LVO was a 5-round tournament, and in round 4. Jake, you and Tim, top table, going into round 4, and I was looking at it and thinking. Matter of fact, I was telling Ann, I said, whoever wins that is probably going to win the whole thing, because the way the points were structuring the people below, and so then I remembered, then I got word what Tim was running, the Shermans, and you mentioned that was pretty much the Achilles hill of the kryptonite of your list. So I'm like, okay, I think Jake's got it. A challenge in front of him. Tim's no pushover. Tim rises to the occasion in big games. He's been there, done that. So I'm like, I'm hedging my bets towards Tim. What I didn't know, because we don't have a reporter on the field, that Tim felt like crap.
Yeah.
So that I did not know.
Yeah.
We'll call it oyster syndrome. And so,
oh no.
And so that adds to the story. So I'm like, okay, I wonder how this game's going to turn out. So first of all, Jake, what stance did you pick?
I went maneuver in all 4 of my missions, as there were a whole lot of tank and armored forces out there that pretty much the players, I feel like they had resolved to attack only the entire time. Okay. And I defended against those, as the thing about the T-26s is to be effective most of the time, they need to be around to the side. So I really want to close with my enemy, and I want to knife fight instead of a long range gunfight. So by defending, I forced my enemies to advance towards me, even though that's not what they would prefer to do.
Sure.
He chose attack, and attack maneuver, we ended up rolling spear point, which is essentially an immediate engagement with really weird deployment. Both of us have to take each other's objectives. So I didn't have the luxury of just holding an objective, but he was the attacker, I was the defender. Some T-3485s in reserve, and like you said, like 24 tanks, including some T-3485s in reserve for me. My ambush was T-3485s as well. So there was adequate terrain for me to hide and make him come towards me, and we had a couple nice hills that I hit on the backside of the hill so that he would have to crest the hill to fire at me, and he obliged, which may have been in part to get things moving, because he was not feeling particularly well. I'm not sure if that upped the level of aggressiveness, but yeah, he came at me, and the T-26s came on from reserve and from the backside of the hills and from the forest and from the trees and on the beaches and everything. And they swarmed around. I got a really lucky round of fire on his Hellcats. The Hellcats are natural enemies, the T-26, as I can just go straight through their armor. The Shermans closed with me and got around behind him and able to pick off 1 or 2 here. My ambush was, I think, only got 1 tank. My ambush was pretty bad. But eventually Tim went from the attack to, I'm going to try to kill a couple platoons. And I had a couple really stubborn T-26s that would just not die or run away. And while he was trying to finish off those platoons, he exposed his tanks, and I was able to break his formation there about an hour and a half into the round.
Okay. So, you won all 5 of your games, right? Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Well, the first one was a bye, but
yeah. Let's. Is there anything you would change your list, or?
I debated whether the 4th T-26 formation was the best use of those points, or whether I would rather have had artillery. But for the most part, everything worked out pretty well. I mean, part of the success of it was just the numbers in mass, and after the first 37 T-26s, the last 12 essentially they overload the enemy's defenses, and they run around with impunity. So yeah, there was a lot of just waltzing around in the blue for my guys, and so that was possible because there were just too many good targets. The T-3485s attracted a lot of fire, so the T-26s could essentially stick their noses where they didn't belong.
Okay, but are those things overworked?
They are overworked, but the Finns. Okay, maybe I need to say a little bit about the T-26s. The Finns are Fearless Vet. All of the Finn armor is Fearless Vet. And so I am blitzing on a 3, and as Brian knows, I kind of live and die with those blitzes sometime. Some are more important than others, and I've got the lucky card in there for when I really need it, usually with the T-3485s. But if the T-26s are hitting their blitzes, then I'm putting out an obscene amount of fire. And though they're not no HE or whatever, so they kill gun teams and tanks and light vehicles and infantry all just fine. So the blitz allows them to keep up their fire. Under version 3, they would be a lot worse than they are now, but very often I could get that extra 4 inches of movement, shoot my full rate of fire without the additional penalty. The Lapland card was never an issue. That was a free 15 points. It just makes my counterattack a 4+ instead. And rarely did I get into extended assaults. You'll notice I have absolutely no artillery as well, so I'm relying upon the tanks to assault and dig out infantry, which the T-26 tanks excel at that. I mean, they're immune to small arms fire. I had a couple guys bailed out from machine guns, but pretty much immune to small arms fire. And being veteran, often assaulting through terrain or to pin down groups that needing 5s and 6s to hit me with Panzerfaust or other anti-tank weapons, I don't think I was ever turned back at this tournament, at least, by Panzerfaust or bazookas or anything like that. Some practice games with Brian, though, he was a bit more successful in turning me back with his weapons, but we'll just chalk that up to dumb beginner's luck.
Was he using your dice?
No. Brian, for whatever reason, thinks my dice are cheaty, and if he actually used them and realized that they were just regular dice, then he would lose that ability to give me crap about them. So I think that's just something that he decided not to do. So, oh well, Brian's just superstitious. The BA-10s were fine. I got a couple inches here and there on the deployment, which is kind of important when you have to fit all these tanks in your deployment area. But really, it's nothing compared to Team Yankee. They're tiny little tanks, and essentially you just think of them as armored infantry, and it's not that bad of a list.
Sometimes all you need is just a couple of inches.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I mean, by the way, your last opponent was with Cedarburg.
Yep. And that was a terrible matchup for that. I always thought that this was a good matchup against the kind of the pack front German infantry list, but then like the one game I just had my ass handed to me was Brian playing the same kind of list, but he only had the trained pack front 88s.
Yeah.
And let me offer a bit of advice to the pack front players: is take the veteran that are 6s to hit. The 5s will die. The 6s are what you need. It's not worth saving those extra 4 points on your 16-point unit or whatever to take the trained versions of them. Take the vets. Leave a couple of your Shreks at home or something like that. The vet ones are definitely worth it. But I was able to kill the pack front guns on one side, and we were playing Gauntlet, so he wasn't able to deploy all of his pack front in the objective zone. So I was able to kill a side, and then he had about 60 points worth of infantry, and you're not moving your infantry against me. With this number of machine guns, you just infantry, unless they're dug in on the objective to start with, they're not going to do anything other than just die in large numbers. So this number of vehicle machine guns makes me very happy.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Wow. So let me kind of just talk about the. We talked about the tables. Hey, how did Best Coast pairings work out? Did you guys like that? That size of an event?
Yeah, there was. It works out real well. I want to give a shout out to Kevin and Christian for running that. They also did something on the side for me that took game stats and stance stats and things like that. And they didn't have to, and they were more than happy to gather that stuff for us. So you'll see that I'm trying to get a copy of all that stuff over to Fretz too, because I know he likes to crunch the numbers and all that. So look for that to come out. But yeah, the Team Yankee ran real smooth. Kevin had it, he was right on top of everything. There was a couple things with the Flames of War one. There was some confusion, I think, at the beginning. So shout out to Vincent from El Paso for setting that up on his phone, kind of the last moment there, and kind of running that while Christian ran the tournament.
Yeah.
So, but matches were fine. We were a little bit of confusion on Sunday morning because we found out that Tim was ill, and Christian was going through and making sure everybody didn't play on the same tables if they didn't have to. Then we had somebody else, which put it at even pairings, and then somebody dropped out for a family issue that put us back at odd. So the pairings shuffled around again. And then Tim came down and they had to put us back at even, but they had to redo all the pairings. So, there was a lot of extra time taken that morning, make sure things got set up right. And kudos for Christian and Vincent for taking their time to make sure that, everybody that came down and got to play the right person. So kudos for them.
As for the program, it was very nice, especially in the second tournament, which allowed us to self-report the results, which things got in much more quickly. The first in Team Yankee, we had to do it through the TO instead, which caused a little bit of a delay and headache. But I think the real Achilles heel of the program is the tables. I don't think it takes into account that you double up on the tables. And so every round after the first was delayed a little bit because they had to work out playing on the same table or whatnot. I know in my third game, we got to a table and talked about terrain and were ready to go. And then the people next to us had already played on their table. And so they switched us at the very last second. So we had to start again. If I had to make any suggestion to the creators of the app, is they need to somehow take into account playing on the same table multiple times. Other than that, I really like the app.
Well, I think the app needs to be more tailored to the Flames of War community. Knowing specifically like the way we do our placings for our tournaments. So win is a win, and if you tie or you lose, it counts as a loss. Whereas I think in
you actually have to tie in order to get a draw. If it's a 2-1 draw, then it still shows up as a victory and a loss.
I think a draw is like half a point or something like that. So I know for the Team Yankee event, I finished behind somebody. We had the same number of points. I had 2 wins. I had 2 wins and a loss. And the reason why he came out ahead is because he had 1 win and 2 draws. So we were at the same number of win points or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And the schedule pushed him up. Whereas I think in most tournaments that we go to, we expect the first tiebreaker to be the number of wins first. So I think for like a huge tournament like 40K where you got hundreds of players, I think that app would work well. But I think for our smaller events, where it's just basically making sure that that you're not pairing the same people together, and it's just a random number generator for tables. It doesn't really take into consider our usual tiebreakers. I think it's more tailored towards us as Flames of War players and tournament organizers. I think it would be an excellent app. But as it stands right now, I'd much rather prefer somebody just doing pen and paper, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. I've been thinking about reaching out to them and feeding this information to them.
I talked to Kevin about that, and he's reached out to him a few times to get things added.
Mm-hmm.
And he's unfortunately, it takes a long time for them to add stuff into it. So maybe getting multiple regions to reach out and ask for additional support or additional features might be the way to go, so they can see it's not just one small group that is asking for it. It's actually this thing's being used, other locations, and more people want to be able to use their app.
I've never used it for another game. Is it just one size fits all for everyone?
Maybe, I don't know. I've never used it for
Oh.
either. I think all the options.
Like, can they change it without borking all of the other tournaments?
Yeah, it's just like a little flag when you go and add like, hey, you want to win by battle points and whatever. It's just another little notch like that. So they just need to add that. And then tables that needs to be the logic and the back end of it to assign that. Which as Tim said, when you have 300, 400 people, like I think the 40K for this was like 1,200 people at LVO. It was massive. The chances of you playing on the same table twice is very, very small. So I don't think it's not nearly something that they have concerned themselves about. Whereas, for an event our size, that it'd be a nice to have to not play on the same tables.
Yeah, I played on the same table 3 times over the course of the weekend. two times in Team Yankee and one in Flames of War. So I got to know this desert table really well.
You knew every dune and burr.
Yeah. But it was just nothing but hills. It was hills and hills only.
I played on that one too. That's where I lost all my jumbos at long range versions.
Yeah.
Like that's table that I just gave up using my dice and started using my opponents, and then things started going well.
Oh,
should have bought some Vegas gambling dice. So.
One of our friends did.
I actually went through the little vendor area that they had to look for some dice to use. There wasn't really anything there. There were some big metal ones, but I didn't want to destroy people's models nor my own with them. But I did use in the last game JD's casino dice. He used the same dice as his dad does, and those seem to work out pretty well. So maybe I'll look for those in the future.
Yeah, actually, it was at LVO that I bought the casino type dice, a set of red, set of blue. But yeah, that was there. All right. So, by the way, you guys all had a good time. Food, other than oysters, was good. Entertainment, travel, though. Yeah. Well, okay. How was the Reno now being off of the strip? Did it make a difference to you guys, or?
Yeah, it was actually easier to get around and go out to different things. You're not like stuck trying to get out of the strip numbers. I really enjoyed the venue. They, had a couple of good restaurants there. A lot of the restaurants were closed, but the Smash Burger was open, and we didn't go to the Korean barbecue place that they had right there where we go up in our tower. But it seemed like I saw a lot of the Flames of War players going there, but a lot of stuff really close, like within 5 to 10 minutes, that were really good. So I enjoyed the location. I thought it was really nice.
Yeah, being off the strip, things were a car trip away instead of a walk away. So that was one of the big differences. And as someone who actually gambled while there, they've got a captive audience there. You can't just walk next door, and it's not the end of the world, but it is what it is.
What was your game?
I won my money at craps. I lost my money at blackjack, and the Golden Buffalo was good to me. The beer slots were poor, so it goes up and down. Paid for my trip though.
Celine Dion. So.
Yeah, you win some, you lose some. Yeah. How about you, Tim? How was your experience?
Yeah, the Rio was pretty small as far as casinos go. The restaurants were nice. It was nice being in the same hotel as a convention, but I figured, anywhere they're going to have the convention, they're going to have a hotel. But I was pretty upset that the one morning that I was able to go down for some gambling, went to a blackjack table, sat down, and I'm playing, and the dealer gets to 22, and I'm like, all right, great. And then she's like, this is a 22 push table. So I, in fact, did not win any money and was very upset. So I went to another blackjack table that I had to bet 15 instead of 10, and then proceeded to lose the rest of my money over there instead.
Yeah, we only play 6 to 5 too. So,
Mm.
and I learned that the easy bust was a sucker bet too. I feel like a fool having bet that for one evening, and then I read up the odds of it, and oh my god, I'm an idiot. So, such is life.
Well, John says I was lucky I made my trip money back with a Bengal win. Oh, the Bengals. Oh wow, you bet for the Bengals. Yeah, I thought the Bengals were going to get. Oh, anyway, so
You got 3 tickets to see the Bengals.
Back to my room, and they were down 21-3, I believe, at the time. And Jake's like, "Oh, yeah." Everybody knew the Bengals were going to lose. I was like, "It's a shame." I remember like the Icky Shuffle and Boomer Esiason and all those guys. I'm like, I love to see them back in the Super Bowl, but yeah, then we come back down, and all of a sudden it's like tied or going to overtime or whatever it was, and it's like, wow.
Was that a 10-1?
Holy crap!
I didn't think it would be that kind of odds on the Bengals.
Not straight to win. It was only what they were.
Okay, well, I think he
7.5 point favorite.
That initial bet onto the Rams.
Oh, yeah.
Game, so.
Maybe if you made that bet at the beginning of the playoffs, yeah.
Yeah. And someone else watching talking about always play 3-2 and basic strategy if you don't count cards.
Yeah, well, again, I only had 6 to 5 there at the casino, so it wasn't the best odds, but such as it is.
I did a pusher with the Rams. Yeah. All right. Unfortunately, I don't know what a pusher is. I could talk about horse racing.
Talk about horse shows.
Yeah.
Russian roulette.
I don't have the.
I know what a gallop is versus a trot. So, okay. Well, by the way, for those who are watching, if you like the content that we've been doing, hit that thumbs up, hit the little love button. That actually helps the logarithm to push it out to more people who are like this stuff. So, okay. I think we're going to go into the Andrew's
mission,
which is we're doing Encounter and Free for All. They are similar and a little bit different. Gentlemen, if you wish to stick around,
it could be our peanut gallery.
Yeah, peanut gallery.
Every time I say something stupid.
Yeah, like with a snicker. I can't believe you said that.
Actually, Brian can check my math on the probability of reserves coming in. So.
Yeah. You're welcome to. You got more impressive things to do than like watching winter storms. Anyway,
work's canceled tomorrow.
Yeah, be safe to everybody out there. It's going to be iced in, especially in Texas. Try to be safe.
Well, by the way, what I am planning to do, I have one mission left, and that's Contact. I was thinking about doing a roundtable on Contact. Just all we could do is talk about
how much we hate it.
How much it sucks.
We only do Annihilation just as a.
So my second game was Contact against in Team Yankee was Contact against John Cedarberg, and that was that was pretty rough. That was not a very enjoyable game, but not because John's bad. It was just Contact is so skewed against the defender, that which I was a defender, that it's just like, what can you do? But especially when your reserves come, over there and you need them like, right here. But anyway, I think I'm going to step out and enjoy Andrew's discussion on free for all in the counter, and I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, thanks for coming, Brad. All right. Let's Andrew, you have the floor. I think
PowerPoint. As required by law, being a college professor, I have to use PowerPoint. And there we are. So we're talking a counter and free-for-all. So, yes, as you can see, we're going to talk about encounter first. I think it's slightly more complex than free-for-all, so we will go with that. And encounter is a very common mission because we play it in attack, 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 maneuver, 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 and defend, defend. And the only one that shows up more is breakthrough. So we get a lot of that. It could go beep. So it'd be like the old film strips when we were in grade school.
I remember.
When you advance the frame, there would be a beep. Okay, so it is a meeting engagement, which means the first player does not get bombardment air or always fires at moving rate of fire. The thing that makes it interesting is the scattered delayed reserves, because neither player knows where the reserves are going to come in. So that makes it a little tricky. Both players begin with all of their infantry and gun teams dug in, which is nice because I remember in version 3, all the meeting engagements, you never started dug in. And so dust up, everybody's scrambling to get their infantry into foxholes. Neither side gets ambushes, and a big one also is objectives go hot on turn 1. So these games can go very quickly. Beep. All right. It's tricky to sort of define who is the attacker and defender. You do roll off at the beginning of the game to see who the attacker is, but that is purely for who chooses what side of the table they want to start on. And I would say the convention seems to be that the attacker usually announces what units they're placing in reserve first. So the defender has a chance to sort of review what the attacker is going to start on the table and adjust their defense, what units they place in reserve accordingly. And then you roll to see who moves first. So the person who is, quote, the attacker at the top of the game is not always the one who's going to go first, which, again, means you have to really think about that. Next slide, please.
There you go.
So it is hard to decide who has the advantage in this because, again, you aren't necessarily going to break down who the attacker and defender are. The only big advantage for the attacker, obviously, the player who moves first, is that they get to shoot first, but they are shooting at a moving rate of fire, so kind of balances it out. You also have the advantage of spearheading before your opponent. So potentially, if there's not a lot of terrain on the table, so I guess at LVO, there's a good chance you could shut down your opponent from spearheading. So that's useful as well. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is where encounter gets interesting, is the deployment phase. And I would argue this is usually where the game is won and lost. Definitely in free-for-all, but we'll get to that. Because you're alternating deployment, the order in which you put your units down becomes really important because you don't want to sort of put your most powerful units down on the table right away. You want to sort of tease out what your opponent has. So if you're running, say, a pack front list, you're going to have 4 independent teams that you can put down to really extend your deployment time. So your opponent may have only 4 or 5 units total in their force, and you may have 4 or 5, but one of them's a pack front. Now you've got 9, all right, 8. So you have the ability to really see where all of their important units are, and you can adjust accordingly.
I have a question. Ready? Especially in a counter, when you in like dust up, when you're doing your reserves at the same time, how do you handle the reserves and the announcement of the reserves?
Yeah, every group seems to handle it differently.
Yeah.
So I tend to play whoever the attacker is announces first.
Okay.
But I don't know, Tim, Jake.
I mean, yeah, I think not that I think, I know, around here, the attacker always announces, but that is after the defender has confirmed that they have selected their reserves. So it's simultaneous, but it's, the attacker has to announce first, but it does not give the defender an opportunity to change what they're holding at the table.
Right. I think there's only one mission where they specify that which player announces their reserves first. Is that right?
I thought it was much more common. Maybe this is just me having selective memory, but I
Both are possible.
Well, so what did you think of it? Because I've seen people, I've actually ran into people saying, I don't have to tell you. I'm just going to put it on the table. I'm like,
Yeah.
You could, I guess, if it just says deploy up to 60% of your force, you can just keep deploying and stop whenever you want and say the rest are in reserve.
yeah. Well, that's the thing is, well, it says, I think it says actually you select 60 and then to start deploying.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, then,
So I guess
that
technically you
would
don't
suggest
have
no
to
choice.
announce it. It just makes it very hard to do the math. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because you don't basically want to be looking at their list as they're deploying, so you know how many points are on the table. That won't get annoying at all. So, like I said, deployment order is really important because you don't want to tip your hands too early in the game. So, put your artillery down because there's usually only a few places on the board artillery is going to go, and where it ends up is generally not that important. Maybe do a spearhead early just so you can shut something off, keep your opponent from doing something. But yeah, really, you want to keep your main, sort of your hammer, off the table until the very last. That's the last unit you want to put on the table. So that's usually how I like it. But remember, you may be the one who's moving second. So if you're planning on attacking, you may still get shot at first. So you have to figure out how you want to deploy. Do you want to really deploy forward and risk taking a lot of shots, or do you want to sort of deploy back and then move forward after your opponent moves? So that's just something you have to sort of decide as you assess the forces that you've got. Obviously, some things like Ferdinand's, they don't care if you shoot at them first. Nothing's going to get them. And because you don't have your opponent doesn't have artillery on the first turn, they can't bombard the Ferdinand out of existence anyway. So, Ferdy can just park on the big hill right in the center of the table and dominate. It's not worried. Okay. So this is my bad math, but I think I tried to determine, how quickly reserves are going to come on. And in Encounter, it could be a while. And this is actually a question I'm glad you guys stuck around for, because it seems to be that a lot of people now go for putting their reserves as one unit or maybe 2 units. And I remember in version 3, I would often have 4 or 5 units in reserve. And I'm wondering if you guys sort of play it that way so you can get all your points on the table quickly, or you want a lot more small units so you have some options. Like if I'm facing a mostly infantry army, I'm going to put these guys in reserve versus a mostly armor army, where I'm going to put these guys in reserve. So it gives you more flexibility.
Well, I think if you're playing a German player, Tiger's going to be reserved automatically.
I dropped out of college statistics.
Well, it's going to be the 3 tigers with the
3 tigers and then some puny little recon platoon.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, I'm
Germans.
the same way usually.
Yeah, but I
We're
don't mind if they come in more slowly. Especially in these missions, it's if your opponent's too aggressive, essentially they're advancing into your reserves and they can come in multiple places, multiple times. I don't mind having 3-4 units as long as they're not something that I need that's vital. And sometimes I will protect particularly vulnerable and ineffective units by sending them on late like that. So it's not always the end of the world to have slow arriving reserves, but
Right. I agree with that. I tend to play the way Tim does, especially because I've been playing a lot more Germans recently, where I'll put, for me, it's Panzer 470s in reserve. And
I think if you have fewer reserves, like missions like counterattack, where the attacker is pushing for that far objective 90% of the time, if you only have 1 reserve, it's that 1 unit against the bulk of his force. So if you flub that up, if they take out those reserves, you got really nothing that can help you.
Right.
So having a couple smaller reserves, I don't think is a bad thing.
I think in this mission, this is one where it actually may pay off because, as we all know, because it's scattered reserves, invariably they're going to come in on the wrong side of the table. And at least this way, you've got 3 or 4 chances for at least one to come in on the right side of the table. The big concern for me is always getting, I don't want to have the bulk of, 60% of my force fighting 100% of their force. So I want to bring in the rest of my forces on the table as quickly as possible. So I tend to go with the big point unit. Maybe, some puny recon or a small infantry, cut down infantry platoon. But that's it.
Yeah. In this mission, though, it's 60 versus 60. I don't mind fighting that 60-60 fight, especially if they're advancing into me. I find that this encounter often turns into kind of a pillow fight for the first 3 turns or so, because nobody wants to be in the middle of an attack and then have your opponent's reserves arrive directly upon you, and the other side of the table is where your reserves come on.
Right.
So
you always know when your opponents are playing. The guys at the other table are playing encounter because of all the giggling.
Yeah. Pillow fight. I like that.
That's right.
Little slap fight.
In their teddies. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Next page, please.
Yeah.
Yep. So there you go. So that's the problem, is that you don't know where they're coming in. I have run into a few people over the years who play, if you roll 3 or 4, they have to come on the table within 16 inches of the center. Yeah. So I try to explain it, but don't play it that way.
Yeah.
So also, guns and mortar teams tend to be bad options for being placed in reserve and encounter, because if they do come in the wrong spot, they will never reach the battleground. Or if they do come in the right spot, there's a very good chance they'll be machine gunned off the table, especially heavier guns who can only dash, so they lose their bulletproof. They lose the gun shield, so they're no longer bulletproof, so they just die on a 4. Same thing with mortars. And even then, if you're bringing them on and they come in a good place, you still have to move them on one turn, probably dig them in on the next turn. So it's going to be the 3rd turn they're on the table that they're actually going to start shooting. So as a general rule, in encounter, they should not be your reserves. There are situations where if you're playing all armored force and you've got a platoon of mortars, they're not going to do anything unless you want to drop smoke. So then throw them in reserve. Otherwise, you want fast mobile units in reserve. Next slide, please. Okay, but here's what's cool about those reserves. If they come in on the corner, they can come in up to 16 inches on the side of the table, which means you have the possibility of doing an end run on to your opponent's objective. And if you dash and you get a follow me, you can be on that. You can be contesting that objective. So that means that if the opponent who's making the push has most of their forces on the other side of the table, they have to leave something back to protect that objective. So that's what's really nice. So unless you're running Soviet recon, you actually probably have some units that can make the run all the way from coming on the table onto the objective. So when you're placing objectives, keep that in mind. So I like that. Okay, next slide. And that means, as it shows in this image, the person who's holding the objective has to leave a unit back to at least prevent you from dashing. If they leave it within 8 inches of the edge of the table, then the unit coming on out of reserve can't dash. Or you want to leave some infantry dug in on the objective, or you want to put an artillery battery on the objective, just to make sure that you have it protected. Because just the threat of a little 3 222 armored cars rolling onto that objective means that your opponent has to leave something back to stop that, at least until all your reserves are on the table. So Jake's approach of having multiple reserve units can really tie down units a lot longer. For me, with my 1 Tiger unit, they come on the table. Now you don't have to worry about a unit suddenly appearing in your backfield. Now you can focus on winning the game instead of playing against what might happen. So. All right, there we go. Because both sides are starting with only 60% of their forces on the table. Players seem to do one of 2 things: they either play defensively till enough of their reserves arrive, or they try to win the game, as quickly as possible before their opponent's reserves start to arrive. So that's very tricky to do, but you can win very quickly if you have the right forces on the table and your opponent has maybe not made the best choices or did not defend their objectives very well. It is possible to win the game before the reserves come on. And then the last technique is sort of do these low risk sort of little pushes, try to chip away at the enemy forces. so that you're not making the big push, but when your reserves start coming in, you've sort of set yourself up to be in a good shape. This and a free-for-all, you have to take the opponent's objective to win. Even if you're defending, you have to, you consider yourself a defender. You have to get over there and take the objective. Yes, you can break their formation, but it can be difficult to do because I'm attacking you and you're on the brink of breaking my formation. I'm simply going to pull back and make you come at me. So again, you have to be able to take your opponent's objective. I would be interested to look at the results from these missions, but I guarantee it's probably more ties than this and contact than any other mission. Maybe free for all, but this is going to be right up there.
Yeah, I try to avoid meeting engagements just so I don't have to worry about these missions.
Right.
I'd rather defend against an attacking force or attack against a defending force than intentionally choose whatever I think my opponent's going to choose.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, I'll leave mine. I'll comment. Keep going.
Okay. So if you think you want to try that, you have to really start. You have to sort of decide what you're going to do before, while you're selecting your reserves. Even if you plan on attacking right at the top of the game, well, you need to pick forces that can do that. You put your slower stuff in reserve, or put stuff that's not going to win you the game quickly in reserve. So it's not like just throw stuff on the table and hope you picked right. You really have to be thinking a couple of steps ahead. I mean, that tactic holds true for every, all flames, but no matter what the mission. But you definitely, if you want to win this game quickly, you definitely have to choose to do that.
Synergy of the force.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think all of us, we build our forces with sort of specific tactics in mind. We know how we're going to play them. But, that's going to change if we're on a certain table, or, we're playing a specific opponent, or we're playing, as Joe always says, it's mission, table, and list, You don't know what you're going to run into until you run into it. So you sort of have to have some flexibility. The player who picks their reserve second needs to determine what their opponent is doing. So if Joe says, I'm going to put all my recon on the table and my stummels and all my good attacky stuff, I assume he's coming at me hard on turn one, so I'm going to pick units that can defend pretty effectively on turn one. If, on the other hand, he's putting all his artillery on the table, he's not coming at me right away. So I'm going to pick stuff that either can push back or will be more effective at sort of where I can sort of keep him at bay, but also start pushing against him. So, like as it says here, if the big push is, go ahead. So you really have to analyze what your opponent's going to do, and then try to put the force on. It's the 60% of your force that's going to stop them from doing it. Or if you're going to try to win the game early, you have to pick your forces that are definitely going to aid you in doing that. Okay, next slide, please. All right, free for all. So this is essentially, in many ways, the same as Encounter, but no reserves. Everybody starts on the table with all of their forces, but it only shows up in two mission boxes. So two out of the 9 mission boxes. So therefore, you don't play it very much. I really can't even think of the last time I played free for all in a tournament. I think the last time I played it was when they used to announce what mission it was. And traditionally, tournaments, Battlefront would almost always end their tournaments with free for all. So not common. Again, same rules as before. Meeting engagement. So first player that moves, no bombardment, no air, firing at moving rate of fire. There are no reserves, no ambush, no minefields. Again, infantry and guns do begin dug in, and then finally objectives go hot on one. So again, you can win the game very quickly. Same situation as Encounter. You roll for attacker and defender twice. First to see who deploys, picks what side of the table they want to defend, and then roll again to see who moves first. So as you're deploying, again, you need to think about, do I want to sort of deploy way back where I'm not going to get lit up by their shooting, or do I think I can weather that because they'll be shooting at moving rate of fire and then I can push forward? So just something to keep in mind. Okay, next slide, please. Again, not a huge advantage attack or defend. The big advantage is picking which side you are deploying from. It's much nicer to have that option than be told where to deploy. Some tables are very friendly to specific forces. Some tables are not. So it's nice to have that option. But yeah, we'll see. Okay. Again, a recon can do up to an 8-inch spearhead. And again, you can use your spearhead to shut their spearhead move down if the terrain is relatively sparse. Okay, next slide, please. Deployment. I would argue that this game, more than any other deployment, is what's going to cost you, win or lose you the game. Because everything starts on the table. You see everything your opponent can do. And nothing's coming on the table afterwards. So you really want to have your units where you need them to be. So, but you have to, again, like Encounter, you have to take your opponent's objective to win. You don't have the option of laying back and letting them come to you unless you think you can break their formation. So when you're deploying, you need to think about that. Don't show the opponent where the big push will be. Try to deploy in such a way that your opponent can't read what you're going to do. That's why often I'll put my main attacking units in the center, so I have the option to swing left or swing right. Or if I need to reinforce a section, I can swing left or swing right. Although every now and then the terrain will say, there's an awesome attacking, route right up the side of the table. So you have to sort of take that into account. I like to put my artillery units on the objectives because that way I don't need to use my more offensive assets to protect them. So that's always useful. Granted, a mortar unit's not going to stop somebody from taking an objective, but they can slow it down. They're a speed bump at that point. So, again, like an Encounter, if the side that has the more units has the advantage. So that, again, you can sort of place your less important units out first and then place your most important units at the end of the deployment time so that your opponent cannot react to what you've just done to them. Placing pack front, again, pack front is great. It gives you, instead of one unit to put down, now you have 4. So you can place all these individual gun teams while your opponent may be placing, a whole platoon at a time. So at the end, when you want to put, say, your Panzer IVs down or your Panzer 470s or whatever, they cannot react to that deployment. So again, deployment order is critical. Start with the artillery, maybe the recon for spearheads, and then the units that you're going to have dug in on the objectives. I mean, most of us tend to start with our infantry platoons dug on an objective. That's not a big surprise. But the question is, where are you going to put your tanks? Where are you going to put your tank destroyers? That's what I worry about, because most of the other deployment is pretty much by the numbers. I know where they're going to put their artillery. I know where they're going to put their infantry. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Once the game starts, I mean, it's flames at this point, so now it just comes down to how well you play. But hopefully, you've set up your attack the right way. So, obviously push on the less defended objective because you don't have to worry about the ambush. But then at the same time, you have a few small units that threaten the small objective or the other objective just to tie down the defenders. So, we're fretzing them. Attack the stronger objective. When you're attacking the stronger objective, you want to get close to the objective, but don't let those forces be destroyed. They're more valuable to you as a force in being. What they're doing is they're tying down your opponent's forces. If you can get anti-tank guns into AT assets into Overwatch, this is really useful for helping break the defense or to Overwatch an attack. Try to move your attack in such a way that it stays between your opponent and your objectives. So they're acting both as the attack force and they're defending your objectives. If your opponent's making the push on one objective, sometimes it's useful rather than throwing all your forces, your reserves, or your forces to defend it, throw your forces at the other objective. If you're winning over there, they may weaken their attack to reinforce it, or you can win the game before they have a chance to react. Small units, fast units, you take advantage of the terrain, and they can sort of infiltrate and get close to the objective, again forcing your opponents to protect the objective, weakening their attack to protect the objective. That's one of the beauties of the German recon list. You have a lot of little platoons that stay gone to ground, so you can slide them forward, and they're very hard to hit. And they can threaten the objective, they can threaten the opponent's artillery, they can pin down their infantry, and they can avoid the main attack forces. You can kind of infiltrate. Next slide, please.
So before we go any further, I'd like to discuss if you guys think it is better to go first or second.
Ooh. No, recon wins games. All right. That's yeah. First or second?
I tend not to shoot much on my first turn anymore. Usually my first turn is always me dashing my forces into a good attack position. So the next turn I shoot. So it doesn't really matter that much to me.
Yeah, meeting engagements, I agree that attack first, it's all about gaining position rather than having a realistic shot at something gone to ground at range and with moving rate of fire.
Right.
Brian had a good comment about what happened at LVO, because he played free for all there.
Well, yeah. The thing is, Brian mentioned he likes to go second. Well, I think I prefer second, but that way you could see what finalize what your opponent's game plan is. If they just come, bum rushing out, like, okay, I know what's going on here. Which, by the way, I guess this ties in. There's the thing, you get the big push, and it's successful or not. So the person that goes first usually gets that position, and then can go for an objective. And then when I've seen this happen a lot. However, if it's successful or not, if it's successful, they win. That person wins the game. If it's not, sometimes there's not enough time left to push to go for that other objective. To go for their objective. In a 2.5 hour game. That's where you see the ties. Hey, I pushed for it. It didn't happen. Basically, it's like you shoot the moon, right? Yeah, because if it doesn't work, it's not necessary you lose right there.
Right. And a lot of that depends on the player, because there are certain players I'll play on a regular basis who I know are very fast. So I know that we have enough time for the push and the counter push to play out. But there are other players we've all run into where, time just seems to stop as they're thinking about their moves, and you are barely going to have enough time to make the initial push, let alone wait for them to push and then counterattack to win. So you pretty much know you have to go at them, hammer and tongs right from the start, because they're not going to be able to finish. So you try to plan the game out like, I have to win this by turn 4, because by turn 4 it's going to be 2.5 hours.
Yeah, going first allows you to seize the best terrain features too.
Right.
Park your troops behind him, and then your opponent's on the wrong foot from the very beginning.
Yeah. Again, it's going to depend on the table. If I have to advance in the open, probably I want to go second, because then I really want to be able to drop a lot of artillery on them as they're in the open. But if there's terrain to move through, I definitely want to move first.
Definitely want a terrain heavy table on this mission. If it's out in the open, then neither side wants to make that first leap, and it just screams 1-1 or 2-2 or something, some kind of draw like that.
And this game is brutal in Team Yankee, where the weapons have the range to go all the way across the table, and a lot of them are auto kills. So moving turn 1 is usually a disaster.
Yeah, true.
Because then the next, because none of your anti-tank guided missiles can fire. Yeah. The next turn they just light you up, even though you ran all your Leo 1s up with stabilizers and think you're doing well. You're not going to do well enough. Okay, so as an example, if I have a troop of Daimler armored cars for 2 points and I can get them close to the objective, and the enemy has a Tiger, a tiger, which is 13 points. That tiger can't stop contesting the objectives until the Daimlers are gone. And the Daimlers, if they're smart and they stay in the woods or stay, concealed, gone to ground, they're 6s to hit. So the tiger is trapped. You've just trapped 13 points of your opponent's forces for 2. And what kind of armored car is that, Joe?
It's a dingo.
There we go.
It's a dingo ate my baby. Okay.
I like the guy's sunglasses there. He's looking kind of like.
Oh yeah, he's sporting it.
That's right. Slightly anachronistic there, but yeah, that's one of the ways you can really mess with somebody is you just keep a force near the objective that ties down a much bigger force.
Right.
All right. I do counsel patience though, because your enemy has all of their forces on the table, they are going to have a lot to shoot at you. So you have to be careful. You can't charge forward like you do when they only have 60% of their forces on the table. And, maybe you can counterpunch, especially if you have a player who's going to play fast or they have a list that plays quickly. If they're just playing all armor, they're going to move a lot faster than an infantry heavy list. So you actually have the ability to kind of wait, let them come to you, hit, chew them up, and then counterattack. Usually in the first part of the game, focus on destroying units rather than trying to grab the objective. I mean, obviously the defender makes a terrible deployment error. You want to take advantage of it, but most people are smart enough to know how to protect an objective. So, what it makes more sense to do in free for all is sort of whittle away at their forces, and then when their forces are ground down enough, then you can make a push for their objective. But it is certainly early in the game, you just don't have that. You just don't have that option. You just have to grind them down for a while.
Brian has a question for Tim. So, Tim, in free for all, with your list, I guess that the one you took the LVO, would you just put your M10s and M4s on one side? Oh, I see. The tanks, right? And push hard with everything else on the other?
Well, I guess it depends on what the enemy has. Another spam list like that has a lot of maneuver, like Jake's. You'd probably have to spread the force pretty evenly on both sides. But if it's a static list, if it's a pack front list, something like that, yeah, you can just put something down on one side and push hard on the other and try to overwhelm it. That I would, depending on the list, that is a viable strategy that I would consider. Yes.
Okay. Fair enough.
See how it does against the Pete Zerfy armored rifle bum rush.
Yeah.
Actually,
matter of fact, I met Pete, saw how that was done. Used that as backbone of my list and ended up winning Southern Nationals with it. I'll admit it. I stole it.
I might only
I remember when he did it to you first, and I played him the very next round. So it's like, okay, I know what you're gonna do. So I had a line of range there to protect all my armored assets. So I was able to machine gun his bazookas off the table before they destroyed all my tanks. So I believe that is the last page of this.
It is. There you go. So there's that. Andrew, that was. I'm going to have to say that was pretty damn thorough. I think you hit it all. The thing is that they're kind of like. Free for all is the simplest mission, but it's one really easy to lose. And encounter is why it looks simple. How the reserves and where the reserves and how you push makes all the difference. And especially coming from that, the 16 on the side and coming and attacking from, if you're able to do that, if those dice gods line up for you, that's just great for hitting that.
I think I remember you
Brian-
winning a game like that with a pair of Pumas.
Brian had a couple comments earlier on that I don't know if you saw me. He said I
Oh,
hadn't
go ahead.
about free for all. He said he hadn't played it in about 4 or 5 years and got it 3 times in LVO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it was. That sounds interesting because it's suddenly like, boom, there
Well,
it is.
it shows up on attack, and defend. So it's like when two like forces run into each other and the two players pushing them are running in the same way. That's when that mission shows up.
Right.
Which is kind of unfortunate because those tend to. I find those not necessarily the greatest games where I'm playing somebody who's a list that's almost a mirror image of mine.
Right. In one of these even battles.
Right.
All right. So Andrew, thanks. Tim, Jake, thanks. Brian.
Good job, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for congratulations for your outing at LVO. Remember, if you guys like this, hit the like button, and we'll continue to bring such high quality content and in-depth analysis and deep dives into this game. That's what they're there for. Plus, remember, we are looking for some help. If you want to help or you think you could, contribute some way, especially I'm looking for someone who wants to be on camera and ask the questions as kind of the voice of the new player. Yeah,
The Andy Richter or the Ed McMahon of.
Yeah.
We'll send you a mug of scotch. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think with that,
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. You want to play us out, Ann?
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Play us out since we did. Actually, it's I said Detroit City Madman. I was a Motor City Madman. Is what Terrible Ted Nugent is known as. We're gonna finish with a little bit more. This is another cover by a group called Fair Game, and they did Stranglehold.
This is my favorite Nugent song.
That scratch fever.
Yeah.
I tried to get an actual recording of Ted. There was one of him at a music merchants convention playing this. It's pretty amazing to actually see him play it.
Oh yeah, after all these years.
Really, really, really long guitar solo in the middle.
Okay. Here's a picture.
Oh no. I bleach. Tim and Jake, are either you coming to Wolf Creek?
Yep, signed up for it. Whatever side they need me.
Probably not.
Running Germans, I figure I'll be a punching bag.
Yeah, I wish the German book would come out in time, but
yeah,
such is life.
Andrew, did you sign up for Germans?
Yeah.
Yep.
I will be. I need to call Chad.
I'm anticipating having to play Germans.
I came up with some decent lists, but I'm very disappointed that if I want to run like the 1/16th card or 9th Panzer or whatever, I can't run a von Socken Sperberband.
Von Socken is hard to pass up.
Yeah, Von Socken, speaking of having a stranglehold. Anyway, well, with that, we're going to say goodnight and as we play out on this great. Oh, it's the breakdown. Anyway, have a good one. We'll see you next week.